Magic in ancient Egypt. Magic pattern. Magic models in Egyptology. Part 1. Magic in ancient Egypt is a topic that has preoccupied Egyptology from its beginnings. The magic debate developed parallel to that in ethnology and received strong impulses from this direction. The following describes the internal discourse on the topic, with a selection of works from the extensive literature being presented. Basically, 2 points of view can be observed within Egyptology early on, which can also be found in the debate about magic outside the subject. These are referred to here as etic viewpoints or Amite perspectives. The etic viewpoint. Amun is seen as a contentious man who was not particularly squeamish in his choice of words. Quite a child of his time, he had a strongly evolutionist image of the Egyptian religion, which he characterized perfectly in his work Egyptian Religion from 1904. From what he sees as the simple material conditions of the Neolithic population of Egypt, one draws conclusions about their equally simple mental attitude, which is described as naive or amazed. Amun assumes the connection between simple material culture and simple, even childlike mentality as a fundamental premise. For Amun, the evolution of human religion follows the model of individual human development. He places the Egyptian religion, particularly in its early form, in man's childhood. However, since for him the Egyptians of the Old, Middle and New Kingdoms inherited and preserved this mentality, he obviously assumes that the Egyptians, despite their more than 3,000 years of history, are based on this stage of development have stopped. Within the presentation of religion he also deals with magic. For him, as for Tyler and Fraser, this is a compulsion that people try to exert on the forces that control fate. 97. In contrast to Tyler and Fraser, Amun does not assume that magic is the natural precursor to religion, but rather a secondary development from it. In his intentionalist approach he is close to both Morse and Fraser. For him, the difference between religion and magic lies in the inner attitude of the actor, whereby religion, like Fraser, takes the submissive attitude, while magic, on the other hand, exercises coercion. Influenced by the thought style of his time, which strictly separated religion and magic, Amun could not see that in Egypt every ritual, whether in temple cult, death cult or magic, was manipulative. The prejudices that Amun had at the time, entirely in keeping with his ideas about magic and what he saw as magical for Egypt, in turn had a noticeable impact on his interpretation of the sources. So he accused the Egyptian magicians of having invented myths to adapt them to their purpose. This view lasted for a very long time in Egyptological research and was refuted by Quack, among others. The last example shows that Amun has had a negative impact on the Egyptological debate on magic, as his prejudices were passed on for a long time. Nevertheless, one must give him credit for the fact that, despite his resentment against Egyptian magic, he edited several texts in this genre, including the famous spells for mother and child. The work Egyptian Magic by Budge, which was published in 1901, and is particularly popular in English-speaking countries, may still have a certain impact on the popular understanding of what Egyptian magic has, but is also continually republished in the German translation. Similar to Amun, Egyptian magic is also a childish superstition for Budge. The compulsion that comes from magic is the main characteristic. However, he also suspected that dishonest priests had deceived the superstitious people in order to make a profit. Within the field, however, Gardner's statements in the Hastings Encyclopedia of Religions and Ethics from 1915 rightly reached a much broader audience. According to Gardner, the Egyptians knew 2 ways, with their environment and theirs. Dealing with everyday life, a normal one and a magical one. If the normal methods, which Gardner calls requests, prayers, orders, promises, or threats, failed, magical means would have been resorted to. Gardner rejects the traditional Western distinction between magic and religion. He states that from an Egyptian perspective there is only haik, which can best be translated as magical power. In dealing with the gods, haik is always involved, perhaps with a few exceptions. However, since this would leave little scope for the term religion and from the perspective of science, one would have to separate the terms. Gardner divides the terms magic and religion into the religious life of the Egyptians, as he regards religion as the temple and death cult, as magic actions that people performed for their own benefit or for the benefit of other living people, and that determined needed miraculous powers to carry it out. He expressly points out that the temple and death cults, of course, used the same practices and that this is an artificial definition of the term. In the following sections of his article, Gardner discusses the magical rite, the magician, and the nature of magic. Here he emphasizes that without the concept of hike, the magical practices, although completely logical in themselves, would have seemed childlike or even completely meaningless to the ancient Egyptians like us. Gardner's definition of magic can be largely agreed upon. It should also be noted that he undertakes to draw up a system of magic spells. His artificial limitation of magic to the private sphere is indebted to Morse's definition, but he deviates from it because in Egypt the legitimacy of magic is not in question. However, we cannot agree with him, especially on the last point, which deals with the nature of magic. Here Gardner overlooks the fact that the point in time, at which the separation of irrational magic and rational science cannot be found in ancient times, as he assumes, but rather in Europe in the 17th and 18th centuries.